Hey folks, I hope you're all doing well. There has been, I guess, a event in the competitive community recently that I'm going to talk about, but also segue into a larger topic. And yeah, as per usual, I am a few weeks late to this. I see that there has been discourse about this event, I suppose. And I don't really follow much of that at all. I know that... maybe I'll save that aside for later. But yeah, I don't really keep up with the TF2 YouTube landscape that much. It does seem like there's kind of Cold War stuff going on. I don't know. Anyway, what is this event I'm talking about? Well, someone in the community made a website that parses through all the publicly available logs. And for those who don't know, logs in sixes or competitive play in general are just log files that upload the different stats from a game that gets played, whether that's a scrim or a match or what have you. If you're playing on a server that is recording and posting logs to slurs.tf, then they're there. Includes your kills, your damage, Ubers, Uber charge rate, things like that, as well as the chat. So this particular website called slurs.tf would basically, see if you were saying any things that you shouldn't be saying in the chat and kind of record that. And this is actually not anything new. There have been sites, or a site at least that I know of, that has done this before. Because again, it's not that hard to parse logs. And in some cases, going back to the 2015 or so log, when you're in an argument with someone, usually when it's an argument about toxicity or about language, is this really something we should still be saying? Then yeah, it's I win the argument now. You think that I shouldn't say slurs, but look at you saying this slur or slur adjacent word, 8 years ago, haha, type of deal. So the actual sixes community and TFTV are not new to this sort of log stalking behavior. And there are sites in the past that you can look up for any word in someone's logs, see if they said it before or not. And yeah, there's been discussion about whether RGL should be, or rather, not so much, people being scared, I guess, that RGL would be banning people for these logs and whatnot. And I suppose we'll talk about RGL and ban policies in general in a moment. But yeah, it's nothing new. However, this time around, it's a clean site that I suppose catalogs things in a very accessible fashion, which makes sense. It's just some project for this dude. But it got kind of picked up or recognized outside of the competitive community, which is definitely something new. And obviously you have the same lame jokes about the fact that there's a leaderboard which shows which people use the most of the racial slurs or generic bigotry or what have you. So obviously you have all the admittedly very unfunny jokes about oh, look at these players, they have competitive racism or whatever. Sure. But yeah, it has kind of started a lot of discussion about, I guess, toxicity and in general. So that's what I want to talk about today, is toxicity in the competitive community. And I will start by saying that I think that a lot of people really damn, dude, pausing on a pug. I think that people really like when sixes players are toxic, or rather they like to gawk at it, rather, in a way that I don't think is the same for when something good is happening, for example. What do I mean by this? Well, for starters, obviously the fact that, some of the most recognition the sixes community has gotten in the past maybe year or so has been related to this website. On top of the fact that I think the most viewed TF2 clip of all time is probably still Banny screaming at Alec to shut the fuck up when he's just like very clearly being trolled, to be charitable here. Like Alec was very much fishing for that reaction. The funny thing is as well that you'll see Alec will like pug scream with Banny to this day. So it's obviously not like super hard feelings, I guess. But this was also like 2015, maybe even earlier. It's like a full decade ago. But yeah, obviously, is there a discussion to be had about Banny specifically as a person here or a community figure? Maybe, because I think a lot of people do think of Banny as particularly toxic, or rather, that's not really generous phrasing, but rather in certain game settings where most people just wouldn't really care that much, Banny does care, such as your pugs and whatnot, is usually like the main criticism there. And yeah, he's kind of like the big guy, so or like the main guy of the community, so there's definitely a lot of eyes on him, whether that's wanted or not. So yeah, there's definitely some instances of that, of like particularly Banny getting upset with someone or things like that. But yeah, the main point I was trying to make is that some of the like main ways that the Sixes community gets exposed to a wider audience is through these toxic moments, which is kind of embarrassing, I guess, because that's like not really most people's experiences. To be fair, I mean, well, yeah, I need to gather my thoughts for a moment. So this is the second recording. I stopped the first one like a minute in because I realized the health wasn't updating correctly. I went to quickly fix that. But I mentioned in my intro in the previous iteration that this might be kind of rambly. I don't really have a clear idea, and I think that's starting to come out a little bit here. But yeah, it's just having an honest conversation, so it's going to happen. So let us, I guess, ground ourselves somewhere with a topic, and that is Sixes actually toxic? And the answer is, I guess it depends. Very satisfying answer, right? So there are certainly toxic elements. And if we want to talk about, damn, there is actually a lot to talk about here. Shoot, where should I begin? I'm pretty confident this demo is not going to be enough. Okay, for starters, I think that things are generally trending upwards as far as the toxicity is concerned, and has been for quite some time. And for example, I started playing Sixes back in like 2016, I think my first logs were, maybe 2017. And I was just pugging, playing a lot of Face-It pugs, whatnot. Took a long break in part because I was going to school and, didn't have the time to play on a team or anything, or just like pug very much or something like that. But also my internet in my apartment at the time was just not good enough to play TF2. So took a bit of a break. Then probably around COVID time, re-emerged. And I specifically sought out very, I guess, welcoming pug groups. Like the pug group that I ended up playing with and forming some teams with some of the players there, I was attracted to because it was like explicitly pro-trans at the time. Well, at the time. I guess it doesn't really exist anymore as a pug group. But yeah, I think that something like that might not have been as much of a thing even years prior. And the idea that, there's enough of an audience, I don't know if that's the right word, but that these spaces exist is definitely nice. And yeah, I think that there's been generally a positive trend on the internet or in gaming spaces towards being more welcoming of people, which is definitely nice. And TF2 is absolutely a beneficiary of that, and arguably more so than some other games. because by competitive game standards, like TF2 or 6 specifically is like very, I think it can be quite friendly in comparison. If we're talking about compared to other competitive games, such as a Counter-Strike, such as like a League of Legends, which I don't play, but my friends do. These places can be like extremely toxic, and like shit talk and just being like awful to people is kind of standard practice. And I think there's a few reasons for that. The big one is that I think 6's has the benefit of sort of a double-edged sword, which I'll talk about. But 6's, the community is small enough that people kind of know each other, and your reputation actually does matter a little bit. Much more so than in other games. Like, if you're just a random Counter-Strike player, you can be like as toxic as you want. I'm sure there's like, I know there are like systems and things in place to report that kind of behavior and whatnot, but like by and large, you can queue into a game and people aren't necessarily going to recognize you and know what is coming and already have an idea of who you are. Not really the case in TF2. And if people are like excessively toxic, then that gets picked up on and people start recognizing that. I can think of, for example, Juju, a maybe recently unbanned, might have found himself a reban, would not surprise me whatsoever. Was a player who was one of these notoriously toxic people, and the first person that I ever actively avoided in Pugs back in Face It Pugs, because he would just use racial slurs. And yeah, it was just extremely unpleasant to play with him. So I avoided him. Likewise, there are some other, there's another recently banned player who I would tend to avoid in Pugs. So when you develop these kind of reputations, right, which I think in some extent encourages people to act more reasonably, or rather act more in line with the group, right? Which isn't to say just like strictly better, because there are examples where the group at large can be like maybe a little weird. Yeah, and that's the flip side of things as well, where unfortunately, if you have a good reputation, I think you can kind of get away with things. Or rather, if you're like a player who people like, then you're just given the benefit of the doubt more than someone who isn't. And yeah, I mean, I can think of like high invite players who are just kind of unpleasant to play with. Because they'll just like yell at people or just like be whiny all the time. And I'm not thinking of Banny here. I don't really play Pugs. I'm not good enough to play Banny Pugs. Not really a thing. Yeah, but they can kind of get away with it just because they're good at the game, I suppose. And that is another thing that's worth mentioning as well, is that the better you are at TF2, generally the more you can get away with, which I think is unfortunate, because I've seen so many people who are just awful, but still finding teams to play on just because they're good at the game. One such example I can think of is Scouty, a somewhat recently banned player who has, just been awful. Never had a good interaction with him, but still found his way onto teams again and again. Sometimes teams with friends of mine on it, just because he was good at playing Scout. And not only did RGL not ban him, but, or rather, RGL wasn't the ones to get him. It was a TF2 game ban, which is like so uncommon. It was, just horribly toxic. And yeah, still finding ways to play, which I think is kind of unfortunate. I do wish that people had a little more integrity about who they were playing with, because for some people it really is just like you're kind of just clocking in, I guess, and your team is not necessarily like your friend group, which I understand. Like I've had friends play on teams that are kind of outside of the friend group. So they don't really hang out and socialize with them as much. Maybe just come back to our Discord after the scrims or whatever and hang out, things like that. Sure. But like actively disliking a teammate, but then playing with them regardless because they're good. Not something I really understand. And yeah, something that I've personally definitely shied away from. Because I'd rather play on a team that's a little bit worse, but like actually fun, than, yeah, just the super dysfunctional teams where players might be a little more talented. And I've seen plenty of those teams like blow up as well. It's another funny thing is the like super toxic teams. A lot of the time they can be quite strong because it's just ignoring any and all personality issues for the sheer sake of trying to win. And when you're winning, it's fine. You can kind of ignore the glaring issues. But once those teams start losing, like they tilt really hard and just explode. So that's always some nice schadenfreude to look out for. Right. So yeah, I suppose that's the point about kind of reputations coming into play, which I think both benefits and hurts TF2 to some extent. What else? I think that a point that's worth making, I suppose, is that this kind of toxicity is by no means limited to competitive TF2. I already talked about other competitive games, but I mean like casual TF2 players can absolutely be equally toxic from my experiences. And I think a lot of the more egregious stuff of just like spamming racial slurs just to get a reaction type of thing is definitely way more common in casual, because there's just so fewer consequences, right? Competitively, like you will get banned for stuff like that, like the more egregious examples, and really not the case in casual, unless you're like Scouty, I guess, and just get reported that many times. So yeah, I think that generally speaking, the sort of moderation and rules around toxicity and particularly like language and things like that, that RGL has, at least, they definitely do a lot to make the outward facing appearance of the game a lot cleaner. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that stuff isn't happening behind closed doors, because it definitely still does. But yeah, at least people aren't like dropping slurs in scrims, and if they do, they get banned. So not a very common occurrence. That's something else I should mention, is that like these people just get banned usually. Like if it's actually just the toxic person who you just never like playing with because they're just miserable, like they all get banned eventually. They do not last at all. Yeah. What else? Well, suppose we can talk about like slurs in general, and sort of the how things have changed a bit, because as I mentioned before, I mean, the community has had these discussions before. I have had these arguments as well, because every time someone on TFTV is crying about, oh, like I just said this slur like this one time, why am I banned? Like, just like ignore chat, whatever. It's like zero sympathy whatsoever. And I also have the benefit of having an extremely clean record in this, which is, I would say, incidental, because I started playing sixes when I started playing TF2 when I was like 7th or 8th grade, which, yeah, I would have been a little ass kid basically. So me not being like finding that super edgy humor funny, or not really speaking in that way or anything like that, was more so incidental, right? I think I could have very easily just been like a toxic child, and like a sort of casually bigoted person in the way that so many people tend to be or can be today, or, you know, at that same time, I suppose. Point being, having a clean record, though, is admittedly quite nice to have, because it's like that sort of hypocrite, oh, look at you saying the N-word in 2016, I win the argument now. Or rather, like, you're a hypocrite and you you don't have any leg to stand on doesn't really apply to me. So I get to say that, say my arguments about like it is literally the easiest thing in the world to just not type slurs. And yeah, it's kind of an untouchable argument at that point. But yeah, what was the point I was making? I was talking about, yeah, these discussions have happened in the past, and there are a lot of like terminology and things that have been really awful that fortunately the community has largely shied away from. And some examples I can think of. By the way, I don't know how monetized this can be or not. I don't know. But some of the classic examples, the one that has largely left common parlance, and thank God for that, is when people or someone deals a lot of damage. There's usually many different ways to express this, such as like I'm nuking them, or everyone's rolled, or a very nice one is saying people are jugged because of Banny had a big jug of water that he liked to talk about and maybe like sold some of as like merch or something, or it was like a brand deal or something. So yeah, people just talked about jugging and like, oh, you're in my jug now. That was very funny. But people would also make references to sexual assault, which, yeah, obviously not okay to be just doing while you're playing video games, right? To just some like general audience of team members. And thankfully that kind of fell out of favor. It's something you hear every now and again, and it like sticks out like a sore thumb anytime I hear it. I'm like, really? Likewise, I think the current frontier, I suppose, is the R word, referring to like disabled people, because yeah, a lot of people for some reason feel like they should just have the right to say it, I guess, or rather like, what's the big deal? I should, as an aside, mention that one of the most annoying things about these discussions, aside from the, oh, you're trying to say that maybe we shouldn't use this pejorative word for a group of people that I'm not even actually talking about. Look at you saying this other bad word like 8 years ago. Haha. That's definitely annoying. But I think the more annoying comment you'll see is when someone's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be saying this. And then someone replies by like, oh, how would I even phrase this? Basically using that exact same word, just casually in the reply, being like, haha, like, you really think that, oh, demo's done. We'll load up another one. Like, haha, you think that, you know, just going to show like, yeah, I am not respecting your argument whatsoever. Which it's like, which one did I want to go to? Cause there was another, yeah, I think, oh, the 27th of September, Jesus. Go with this one, I guess. Right. It's just like very annoying, very dismissive. And I think a lot of the time kind of childish, from people who just kind of want to say, whatever they want without much consideration to the thoughts of others. Yeah. What else? Because there's definitely other stuff to talk about. So yeah, things like that, I think have been generally trending positively. People have kind of rooted out over time, like, hey, like this probably isn't like an okay thing to just so casually be saying. Let's not do that. And lo and behold, it's actually really easy to not say things. So yeah, overall trending upwards. Right. What else? I think as far as like non-bigotry is concerned and just like general toxicity, there's definitely something to be said about the new player experience for a few reasons. So if someone's like new to TF2, and this is something that has literally been happening for as long as TF2 has been played, like I have been, a funny example I can think of is back when I was really new to the game. I was a Bandy subscriber. I liked watching his streams and whatnot. And at this time, PugChamp was the main pug site. And yeah, you just add up to your role. And when enough players were added, there would be captains picking teams. And a very common occurrence in any pug setting where you add up to a specific role is not having enough medics. So it was a pretty common thing for newer players to add medic just to get some reps in, right? Or in the case of these Bandy streams, it's a viewer of his who kind of wants some limelight or wants to play with him, or gets the pug going. In some cases, again, this is so long ago that I don't even remember how much it's encouraged of like, hey, to add up or whatever. Point being, there were plenty of PugChamp pugs where there's just a noob medic on one team who is there because they want to play with the big dogs. And they might be bad enough to like single-handedly lose the game, right? It's just how it is. And on one occasion, I was one of these medics playing in a Bandy pug, and I remember distinctly we were playing on Sunshine 2nd, Disad by Shutter, and Bandy tells me specifically, don't be caught to this Uber. I'm like, okay. So I'm chilling in the Shutter, not really thinking. I'm just like brainlessly walk like 3 steps too far forward from the Shutter, and I'm caught to the Uber and I die and I get yelled at. It's like, in hindsight, it's funny. At the time, I'm not like so ashamed or whatever. But point being, in these pug settings, where players might be used to playing with players at their skill level, if someone's extremely new, it can be off-putting, and in some cases, like, can just lose the game. I say this not to discourage anyone from trying out sixes and pugging and whatnot. I will say that just like actually know like where you're pugging, basically, not what you're doing when you're pugging, because obviously you just have to get reps in to learn. Like, you will just be that potato for a little bit, which, you know, it's totally fine. We've all been there. But, you know, if it's your first pug ever and you're playing among like main players or players that are like decently good, then you might have some issues there, as opposed to an easier setting, which are still available to you. All this is to say that there are some people who, rather than be encouraging or supportive or helping out newer players who are just very clearly clueless and maybe, hurting their team's chances of winning the game, there are people who will just be really annoying and complainy and just, like, for lack of a better term, just like bitching to these newer players. One of which happens to be that recently permabanned person. And yeah, it's just, it's annoying to see. Sometimes if I'm in a pug and something like that's happening, I'll call it out and be like, chill out. No one actually really cares that much. But it is admittedly annoying to lose in this game. Like, people are competitive. So of course you want to win, and tensions can be high. I will say that, like, I am someone who doesn't really tilt, I'll say, or rather, maybe that's or too charitable. But I don't like snap at people and like get mad at people during the game or whatnot. Typically speaking, I can be passive aggressive if like I call something very clearly and then it gets ignored and then we get punished by the same thing I called. But even I'm like, will get high emotions if it's a high stakes match. But in a team setting with, you know, teammates I know that I'm friends with, we can handle it, right? Just talk things over, and I'm not like calling people dog shit or whatever, saying they're bad, but more so just like, we really need to be doing this instead of that, or whatever. Actual like productive discussions, even though it's emotional. But point being, obviously any competitive setting, people are going to be competitive. They're going to want to win, and they're not going to be happy if they're not winning. And obviously when you have a diverse group of players, then you're going to have a diverse diversity of reactions and diversity of means of expressing that frustration, sometimes productively, sometimes less so. But yeah, I guess all that is to say that there can be some cases of toxicity in the sort of new player experience when they're mixed in with the experienced players. Now, I should mention as well, it's a good segue that I wanted to talk about earlier, actually, is there is a lot of, or rather, there's a weird tendency of people to develop an ego. It's like Dunning-Kruger ego, right? Where, for those who don't know, the Dunning-Kruger effect basically refers to a tendency of people to sort of overestimate how much they know about a subject when they're loosely familiar with it, compared to when you actually become very familiar with it and like become an expert. Then you start to realize like, okay, there's a lot here that I don't know. Or if you're like really, really, really know everything, you're like, yeah, I kind of know the stuff here. But there's definitely some Dunning-Kruger ego, because I gotta say, of all the divisions I've played, the division with the most players who think that they are like hot shit, the best people ever. I really hope this flank works. Oh God. Oh God. Yeah, the people who really think they're all that and like trash talking and all that, are like an intermediate. It's crazy. There's definitely a tendency of like Dunning-Kruger ego from these players who really don't play at like the high level, really thinking they're all that. That being said, I suppose there's another point to be made about just trash talk in general, because I think that in a lot of these discussions, people like to equate just clear cases of toxicity and bigotry and things of that nature with just trash talk, which I think is, in many cases, probably not that good faith. I don't know if they actually believe it that much. But I think worst case, just like pretty incorrect. So I don't know if this spy play works at all. Oh, you know what? I beefed this stab. So feel free to look away for a few seconds. Right. Yeah. And, you know, there's definitely elements of trash talk in all sorts of games, especially competitive games. TF2 doesn't seem outwardly trash talky, I'll say. And also the fact that, you know, the community is so small and people tend to know each other, or know of each other at least. A lot of the trash talk tends to be more friendly, more bantery. Now, that being said, there's definitely, there's a funny tendency of like the egos clashing online and whatever, leading to people just not liking each other for no real reason other than just like childish, like, I hate that guy type of thing. And it's funny as well, because when people actually go to LANs and meet in person, all that stuff just melts away, where they're like, yeah, why do I dislike you again? Or like, yeah, sorry for all that, dude. Like, are we cool? Yeah, we're cool. And it's so funny because it was, oh man, what a pipe. It's so funny too, because it was all so frivolous to begin with that like even apologizing and making amends seems frivolous as well. But yeah, I guess the point I was making is that this is very divorced from trash talk, because so many people, when it comes to things like saying slurs or just making the experience for the other players in the server miserable, for no other reason than like ego stroking, self-gratification, or just being, you know, maladjusted socially, to be honest. In cases like that, a lot of people are just like, oh, just get thicker skin, like just ignore them. Oh, it's just words. It's like, first of all, grow up. Second of all, it's the easiest thing in the world to not be saying those. But also, I think that, thankfully, most people in the community have kind of realized that, you know, actually being at least welcoming to people, either extending some semblance of community towards newer players, or not just being an openly hostile environment, I guess, for, say, a group of people, whether that be gender or sex or race or whatnot. you're going to have more people to play with. And that's like better than trying to harbor like the few just shut in weirdos who might be good at the game in some cases. A lot of the case, not so much. That, yeah, you just want to have around for whatever reason until they inevitably get banned, I guess. Okay. I don't know if there's anything else for me to talk about. We really didn't talk about slurs.tf that much, I guess. But point being, if I were to summarize, is competitive TF2 toxic? In some ways, yes. In some ways, it's not really unique either. It's toxic in the same ways that competitive games in general can be. And I think in many ways, no. I think that it being such a small community means that there's at least some more accountability to act more normal and, you know, like an actual human being. And I think I've seen things generally positively trending from like, for example, I mean, there were invite players famously yelling out racial slurs at LAN years ago. And yeah, stuff like that doesn't really happen so much anymore. Thank God. So yeah, I guess that's that. Is there anything else? Yeah, I thought I'd be doing more discussion about like how much it matters whether you said slurs however many years ago. I don't know. I don't really have much to say there. So anyway, yeah, interesting topic, I guess. I did mostly just want to get a video out there because I know it's been some time. And this is somewhat current. And I, in recent discussions as well, I've been on a couple podcasts. I think people are attracted to the honesty, and yeah, having an actual honest discussion on this topic, I think would be quite nice, just so that people actually have some context on what people might be talking about or referring to when they talk about sixes being toxic, or they talk about competitive toxicity and things like that. Because a lot of the time, this is coming from the opinions of people outside the scene who don't actually really know what's going on. So yeah, now you have a more informed opinion, hopefully. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel as well if you enjoy. I should stop saying that at the end because I know a lot of you are probably like fast asleep at this point. But if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that. Like the video, all the algorithm stuff. Because yeah, I actually do like seeing that number go up. I'm able to acknowledge now. But that's all from me. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you all next time.